Welcome back to the Holistic Homes Podcast. I'm Christine, a licensed general contractor here in California and a holistic home consultant helping you build a healthier home. And in today's episode, I'm going to share with you exactly why third-party testing is the most important thing you can be doing if you actually want to be building or renovating a healthy home. So it's a little bit more complex than you might think, but I promise it's simple, and I'm going to walk you through it today. So the reason that I bring up third-party testing so much is because it's not going to happen unless you ask for it. It's not a code requirement in most instances, and it's just simply not talked about enough. So I'm going to talk you through what type of third-party testing, when you should consider having that a part of your project, and we'll also talk about how much some of this can cost. So third-party testing, when it comes to residential construction, is rarely ever performed. But it's something that you should consider talking to your architect and also your builder well before your project ever begins. So let's talk about what third-party testing even is. So in a traditional home build, you'll have an architect. You might even just have a draftsman, but you'll have somebody drafting up your plans that's giving direction on how you want your home to be built. Those plans are going to be handed over to your contractor to give you a price, and that contractor is going to build what's on those plans. Most of the time in just a conventional way of building, even in custom home building today, most of the time, the guidelines for how that home's going to be built is building code standards. The biggest issue I have with home building today is that it seems that the industry has taken building code as the gold standard, when truly it's the bare minimum standard to build a safe home. And when I say a safe home, that means one that's not going to structurally fall apart. The other issue I have is that building codes are often driven by energy efficiency. Definitely here in California, that it seems to be the highest importance, but most building codes are driven to structural integrity. That's a good thing. But then also energy efficiency. There is not really any building code that is driven by occupant health. And that is what building a healthy home is, where we are wanting to build a home that is putting the occupant's health at the forefront, not energy efficiency. That should be a nice byproduct of occupant health, but I digress a little bit here. So if you're just letting the traditional process of home building run its course, you're going to have an architect, you're going to have a contractor building that home, and then you are going to have the local city or county inspector come by periodically for inspection checks. That's pretty much it. That's what you get. To me, that is not enough to build really any home. Even if you want to build a healthy home and it's on the lower end of your priorities, still just having a city or county inspector observe and do the quality control checks on your home, that's not likely to result in a high quality home, and likely one that could even have building defects. And that puzzles people so much in the idea of, what do you mean? Like, isn't the city inspector there to actually quality control my home? And the truth is, no, it's not even feasibly possible for a city inspector, who typically their inspections last maybe somewhere around 30 minutes, maybe an hour. They are there to check the box. They're going to look at the plans and they're going to look at what's built and they're going to check the box and sign off on it. They are not looking for water damage. They are not looking for water intrusion. They are not doing any sort of robust testing. They are looking at the plans and verifying the work in place to some degree. So when I say third-party testing is the most important thing that you can incorporate into your project, I mean it. And the reason is because you're building a home and you have humans building your home, unless you're doing one of those 3D printed concrete homes. But you have humans building your home, and human error is a fact of life. And not many people know this, that there is only one area of your entire project that is required to actually undergo some form of leak testing. And it's not an area that you probably think is most critical. It's only in your bathroom. And the requirement is, this is a part of that inspection process. The requirement is a 24-hour leak test of a shower pan. So where you have your shower that's going to have the drain in the middle, and you likely have a curb, which is about 4 or 6 inches. The requirement is, after that shower pan is waterproof, the drain is plugged and water is filled up to the curb area. And that water just sits there for what is supposed to be 24 hours. And there's a mark to see if the water level drops at all. If it drops, well, there's evidence that there's a leak somewhere. That is the only area of a new construction project that requires actual leak testing, like with water, which is so wild to actually think about. I bet you can think of at least one shower that you know of that has failed, whether it's something that you've experienced, a neighbor, a family member, a friend. Everyone knows somebody who has had some form of water damage from a shower. And if you think about that even further, that is the one area of that project that actually had a leak inspection. And there are still so many failures in bathroom showers today. Now, think about all of the other areas of your home that underwent no leak testing of any kind. So we're having massive failures in showers that actually have inspections. Now think about your windows. New construction, renovation, I don't care what type of windows they are. They typically do not undergo any type of leak testing whatsoever. And I can tell you, based on experience in renovations and new construction projects all over the US, I would put a good amount of money to bet that just about every home has at least one window that is leaking. This doesn't mean that when a rain comes through, there's just like puddles of water coming in through the window. It could be the smallest of leaks, but happening over and over and over again. And that is because there is not enough quality control in traditional home construction. So here's what I like to do. Third-party testing, specifically leak testing of the enclosure. The enclosure is referred to all of the exterior elements of your home. Your exterior walls, your windows, your doors, your roof, could even be below grade, your basement, anything that is in charge of keeping water out from your home should theoretically undergo leak testing. That's not something you're going to get on an inspection card from your building department. So if you want to incorporate that, you're going to need to hire third-party leak testing experts. And I'll tell you what that tends to look like if you want to do some searching. But the ideal stage to do third-party testing, and we'll talk specifically about the exterior windows and doors and anything up on the roof that might be penetrating the roof. That is going to be referred to as either a forensic engineer, sometimes those firms will perform on-site leak testing, or you can look for experts in your area that perform building enclosure leak testing or building enclosure commissioning. I will say it's a little bit of a needle in a haystack find because this is not typically done on residential construction. What you're more likely to find are commercial companies that perform this type of testing on commercial applications. That is a bit more common. Even in commercial industries, it's very common to only test about 10% of openings. And think of these high-rise structures or big commercial properties. 10% is not a lot of testing, but that is where it's most commonly done. So you can consider reaching out to some of those companies to see if they will even perform the same type of testing in residential. Even myself, I've run into some roadblocks where these companies that perform tests on commercial structures, they're not always so open and willing to do it on residential. I've had lengthy conversations with them, and that's just their business model for the most part. But you can find companies that will do testing during construction. You want to ask about doing window leak testing during new construction. Now, if you're doing a renovation or an existing home, just mention that to them. Okay, so when does this type of testing take place? Ideally, we are taking a proactive approach to building, and you are incorporating this third-party quality control during construction. And that's going to typically take place at what's referred to as the dried in stage. Dried in is when essentially the interior of your home is protected from all of the exterior elements. So meaning if a heavy rain comes through, it's not going to end up all over your framing and inside your home. So this typically takes place around maybe 3 or 4 months after construction begins. So you have your foundation in place, exterior walls are in place, your roof is on, and you have your windows installed. And then you stop, you pause, and leak testing takes place at that stage. You want to make sure your windows are watertight and they are actually prepared for leak testing, but that's the ideal stage to have this type of quality control, not at the end of construction, not after stucco or brick is on the exterior, not after, construction keeps moving. Because if there are issues with the windows, you want to be able to make corrections and correct the issue, not having to rip off brick from your home to do that. The other reason is that your water resistive barrier, your WRB, and all of the flashing that's in place to keep those windows watertight, those are in place. It's not the brick or the stucco or the siding that is keeping your windows watertight. That is not the case. So you want to be testing at that waterproofing and flashing layer. So this can absolutely alter schedule. There are pauses in construction to allow for this type of testing, but it's not severely detrimental to the overall schedule. So as long as you're able to set this expectation with your contractor early on in your project, then the whole team can prepare for this. Now, let me give you an example of what this looks like on a lot of our projects that we are coordinating this type of testing. The ideal stage to have third-party testing after you're dried in and your windows are in is during a mock-up stage. So think about this. This actually happened on a few projects. I'll give you example A and example B. On example A, this new construction project, we set the expectation early, we had coordinated this testing to take place, and we knew when windows were going to arrive. In that project, this was a project in Texas, we were able to coordinate leak testing day one of window install. There was going to be over 40 windows installed here. And so day one of install, we were able to have leak testing done on what we refer to as those mock-up windows, meaning 4 windows are installed. Here's what we're planning for the remaining 40 windows. Let's test these 4 windows and nip anything in the bud. If there's a flashing issue, if there's something happening that's allowing daylight, visible daylight into the home, let's catch that now and see how this install is going to perform on the remaining 40 windows. And you want to do that ideally at a mock-up stage, because it's not going to feel great to have all of your windows leak tested, or even a handful of them, and there actually be issues. So in example A, where there's mock-up testing day one of window install, or it doesn't necessarily need to be day one, but the expectation is set is that we are going to leak test the proposed window install. If there's any issues, everyone's going to get together, correct those issues, and then proceed with the remaining 40 windows. That is going to feel a whole heck of a lot better than example B. So this was a project that was in Northern California, where things were moving pretty quickly. And we had intended to do mock-up testing of the windows, but what happened was the windows were actually delayed. So we had to readjust. The leak testing company was now not available until 4 weeks later. And so the decision was by the client that, hey, we don't want to hold up construction. We just want to get all of the windows in, and then we will test all of the windows in 4 weeks' time. Okay, we made that expectation between the leak testing company and now the contractor and the homeowner that was going to be the process. Now this project had nearly 40 windows as well. I think there was somewhere around 30 to 35 windows. Everyone assured the homeowner that all of the windows were going to be watertight. Everyone knew that these windows were going to be leak tested by a third-party company. So 4 weeks later, company shows up, they begin leak testing. Window 1 failed. There was an issue with the bottom sill of the window was not fully flashed. And so there was an issue, window 1. The leak testing company moved on to window 2, and that window failed within minutes. The decision was to cease any more testing that day, because something else you need to be aware of if you're going to do leak testing is that you are going to be stress testing your home with water and be prepared for water to come into your home. That's not typically very exciting for a homeowner that's gone to great lengths to keep water out of their home and keep lumber dry. So window 2 had failed. Water came into the home through a flashing issue with the window. And what was discovered is that the sealant that was used was not actually compatible with the window. And there were numerous issues, and the corrective action actually needed to happen on all 30, 35 windows. So that's not going to feel great. That's definitely going to delay the project. And whose responsibility is it to correct all of those windows? That's then not a very fun conversation. So 2 different scenarios. Ideally, you are nipping issues in the bud during early stages of windows being installed, not completely waiting until all of the windows are installed for testing. Now, it doesn't always happen that all of the windows are failing, but it's certainly a possibility. So just know that those are the options. The ideal stage to incorporate third-party leak testing is going to be in those, day 1, day 2 of windows going in. So the next question that often comes up with doing this type of third-party quality control is, what does it cost? How much to budget for something like this in your project? And it's going to depend, but I want to give you something to work with, to plan for. So typically this type of testing, it's going to be performed by a company that's going to have spray rack capabilities. So meaning they are setting up and taking down these individual spray racks that are applying water to the window while also on the interior side putting the window under negative pressure. And I'll talk more about those specifics as well. But this type of testing is going to typically be expensed on like a per day basis, meaning that the cost of this type of testing isn't often based on number of windows. It's often based off number of days, because they're bringing in a whole crew, they're bringing in all their equipment, and they're planning to be there the whole day for leak testing. So most of the time, you can anticipate to pay, I would say, a good minimum would be around $4,000 a day. That's what we see in California, Texas, East Coast, Florida, all the projects that we've coordinated this on. 4,000, give or take, is a good kind of ballpark per day. That is if you can find a company that does residential and not just commercial. Commercial leak testing far exceeds that per day rate. So typically about $4,000 a day. Okay, next question is, well, what does that mean? What do I get like per day? So leak testing, it's very important that it's done per a standard. You don't want to just willy-nilly get out there with a garden hose and start putting water on the windows. That's uncontrolled testing. That's a type of testing that your contractor's likely to tell you, well, I could get anything to leak if I put water on it for a long enough time. There's no standard that you're working off of when just doing a garden hose test. So formal leak testing is going to be done per a standard. There's ASTM is one of the standards. AMA is another type of standard. And these companies are adhering to these standards. Well, to determine how much water, for what length of time, under what pressure, that's all going to dictate how many windows you can get tested per day. All manufactured windows here in the US are going to have performance standards. That means that they have rated their windows in a lab to a certain amount of pressure, a certain length of time, and there are standards that they say our windows will pass this type of standard. So that information is then used for this type of formal testing. So then in the field, we generally see somewhere around maybe 3 to 5 windows per day being tested to these high standards, which is not a lot, right? You're talking about a home that's got 30, 40, maybe more windows, and you can get through maybe 4 or 5 windows a day. You're looking at 7 to 10 days of testing. So do the math there, and that can give you some ballpark numbers. Now, that's if you're planning to do all of the windows. Again, I mentioned commercial testing. It's pretty standard to do 10% of windows. The goal here, what I want you to focus on, is what your comfort level is. Are you comfortable with having 10% of the windows tested and that gives you peace of mind? I think that's great. Are you a family that's coming from a prior water damaged home and you experienced window leaks before and you just have this heightened sense of wanting to make sure that there are no windows with any active leaks? You might need additional days of testing and really want to have all those windows tested. So it's really something to consider based off of what your expectations are. But the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this is setting the expectation early of whatever this looks like for you and your project. Set the expectation early with the architect, even with the builder, with the window installer, that, hey, these windows are going to be tested. And then also budget for this. Budget for this additional inspection. This is not something that's going to come standard in a residential project. So budget for it, and then also plan accordingly in advance. Is this going to cause delays in your project? Is there coordination that needs to happen with this leak testing company and they only have one opening available that's in 4 weeks' time from now? So start doing research early, start reaching out to companies, get things lined up so that you don't miss this critical window. You don't want to run into scheduling issues that then makes it almost unfeasible to get this type of testing done on your project. And last thing I want to encourage you to consider in this type of testing is what happens next. Like if there is water intrusion, what happens after that? Like setting the stage with the entire team that you're taking this really seriously and you are footing the expense to have this type of testing, and you are expecting windows that don't leak at the end of your project. So sometimes it can be uncomfortable conversations, but I will tell you it's much better than having to go through a remediation in 5 years' time after it's discovered that, hey, some of these windows had been leaking, now there's drywall damage and baseboards and insulation, all of it needs to come out and there's a remediation that needs to happen. So third-party testing is critical, and I will say likely the most important thing that you can do in building a healthy home is having this type of testing. There is more third-party quality control that we like to infuse into a project, but start here. If you're going to do one and only have the budget to do one area, to me, it's going to be leak testing of the exterior. So my hope is that today was really helpful to kind of guide you in those next steps and hopefully queuing up something like this for your project, whether you're building right now, renovating, or even if you've been in your home for 5 or 10 years, you can always have this type of testing done. So hope this episode was helpful for you. I would love to hear how you are doing with leak testing and what other type of episodes you'd like for us to put out. And if you want to reach out to us on social media, you can find us on Instagram at Holistic Homes by Christine. Send us a message. We would love to see if we can help you with your project. So I will see you on the next episode.